Hello everyone. I wanted to do a short video about the Stanford prison experiment because it's a really interesting experiment in social psychology. And we really learned a whole lot about human nature with the Stanford prison experiment. So this experiment was done in 1971 by Philip Zimbardo, a psychologist at Stanford University. And what he was trying to understand was how social roles affect our behavior. And so what he decided to do was set up a mock prison or a fake prison at the basement in the basement of Stanford University. And he really wanted to understand, how it might change a person to give them a role as a guard or as a prisoner. And so what he did was he advertised in the student newspaper for participants for the study, and he paid them $15 a day, which was pretty decent money back in the 70s or so. And the experiment was supposed to last 2 weeks. Students also underwent psychological testing prior to the experiment to make sure that they didn't have any underlying psychological issues. They chose 21 different volunteers and they split them into two groups. So 10 students were prisoners and 11 students were assigned to be guards. The students who were assigned to be prisoners were actually arrested by an actual, I don't know if they were actual police officers, but they looked like a real police officer. And they were brought into the prison at Stanford University. And they were made to strip down. They put them in kind of a humiliating outfit here. It kind of looks like a long t-shirt, maybe. It almost looks like a dress. They took away from their names. They gave them a number. So basically, they took away their original identity and turned them into prisoners pretty rapidly. The guards were given pretty nice uniforms. They were given those Ray-Ban sunglasses. I don't know if those are authentic, probably not. And then they were also given a billy club, but they were told they were not allowed to physically abuse the prisoners, but that they should create an atmosphere where the prisoners felt powerless, which is kind of interesting. And then the supervision was minimal. So we do have some video footage of the Stanford prison experiment. I'm going to add a couple of videos with original footage from the experiment. There's also recently been a movie here. That was made about the Stanford prison experiment. It's still an experiment that really fascinates the public because it really gives us a window into human nature. So I'll put the trailer to the movie on there as well. You could watch the whole movie. I think it's on Netflix now. But supervision was minimal, so this is kind of not the best setup here. And what happened was at first the prisoners weren't really taking it seriously. They were laughing and kind of joking around, and the guards kind of saw that as a threat to their authority, and they started tamping down on the pressure. So the guards started subjecting them to humiliating things. They put bags on their head, as you can see over here. They woke them up in the middle of the night, so they were sleep deprived. They made them do push-ups. They put them in solitary confinement, and they really just humiliated them and broke down their personality. And if I wish we had time to talk about cults, but this is kind of what cults do as well, is they take away the person's former identity and they break them down psychologically. And that's what happened with these prisoners and the guards. This experiment was only supposed to last 2 weeks, but it was shut down after 6 days because the guards had become so abusive to the prisoners. And they weren't physically abusive, but they were psychologically abusive. And one of the things that this experiment discovered is that psychological torture or psychological abuse can be worse than physical abuse. So Phil Zimbardo said, power can corrupt in some situations. You give somebody authority or a particular role, sometimes that can cause them to behave in a way that they wouldn't normally behave. And he really found that good people can do some pretty bad things given the right circumstances, that they easily follow authority. And his experiment did demonstrate the strong influence of social roles and social situations on our behavior. Had these students not been put in this situation and given these particular roles, they never would have behaved in this manner. So he definitely was right about that. And then the prisoners and the guards really adopted these roles, these artificial roles, very rapidly within 36 hours, so a day and a half at this experiment. He also discovered that abuse sort of occurs gradually and you sort of get used to it. You don't pay as much attention to it. But yeah, he did find that psychological abuse is worse than physical abuse. In order to break down a person, you take away their identity, you humiliate them, you use peer pressure, intimidation, and it really can break down a person. So close supervision and guidelines are really necessary to prevent abuse. There definitely are a lot of ethical questions about this experiment. It's not an experiment that has ever been replicated, and it's not an experiment that would be considered ethical today because many of the participants in the study were harmed, even the guards. The guards kind of learned that they had this sort of dark part of their personality that they didn't realize, and they may have felt pretty bad about becoming so abusive in a psychological manner. And then, of course, the prisoners really were psychologically broken down and definitely could have been harmed from this experiment. So this is not an experiment that we would allow to happen today. The book has a little link to talk with Phil Zimbardo about the Abu Ghira, I don't even know how you say this, Abu Dhabi prison abuse that occurred in Iraq during the Iraq War, so a while ago. But his experiment really explains how people can get out of control when they're given a role in authority over somebody and told to keep them under control. So it's a really interesting experiment on social behavior and just human nature. I always talk to my class about social psychology as sort of tells us a lot about the dark side of human nature, which is kind of scary and sad. But his experiment really did teach us about that.